So, very good evening to all of you. I, Sanandhi Sachdeva, on behalf of Jaipuria Institute of Management, welcome you all to this digital platform to the webinar on emerging fintech roles in COVID times. We have with us today Ms. Megha Gupta, Director HR, Pfizer. She's a Director HR professional with 14 years of HR experience across Fortune 500 companies. She has worked for organizations in financial technology, US-based IT services, telecom, creative sector. Areas of expertise include strategic business partnership, organizational development, leadership development, and many more. Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone.
So we also have with us Mr. Arjun Khanna. He's part of EdCast India leadership team as Vice President Client Engagement. In his role, Arjun leads large-scale strategic client engagements. He leads the academia business in EdCast. Mr. Arjun has 19 plus years of consulting, business, HR, entrepreneurship experience. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. I look forward to the discussion today.
We also have with us Mr. Atul Mehta, SVP, Head of Sales, Razorpay. He possesses 14 plus years of hands-on global experience in the areas of fintech, alliances, enterprise sales, channel sales, analytics-driven strategy, and business intelligence. He has exposure across digital payments, travel, telecom, FMCG, and government domains, managed large teams to successfully deliver projects across the sector. Welcome, Mr. Atul.
Thanks, Andy. Thanks, everyone. And it's always good to be back at GEMS. I have an old association with the college and looking forward to the healthy discussion.
Great. We have with us Dr. Ashwini Varshney, Dean Student Welfare, Jaipuria Institute of Management. He is MBA, MCOM, PhD in the area of accounting and finance. He has over 12 years of rich experience in the field of management education. He is known for his dedication and commitment for the welfare of the students. Welcome, Dr. Ashwini.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much.
We have with us Dr. Nidhi Mathur, Associate Professor, Jaipuria Institute of Management. She's BSc, MBA NET and has all over experience of over 15 years. She is a well-known faculty in the field of human values and professional ethics and doing her best for the society. Welcome,
Thank you so much, Sanandhi. Welcome all.
And I am Assistant Professor Sanandhi Sachdeva. I have been associated with the Institute for over 5 years now. My area of interest is business communication and employability enhancement. So I welcome you all and I welcome all the viewers who have been watching us across the corporate and academia. Welcome all of you.
Thank you very much.
So
Thank you so much.
Okay. So before we begin the whole webinar, I would like to share a basic experience on the topic. It is obviously a pre-COVID experience because life has changed a lot after COVID and during COVID. So it is an experience of a stormy evening when I was traveling by my car and I stopped and I wanted to have tea. So we have those tapri walas who are waiting alongside. So he poured all the things which are required, prerequisites of a tea, cinnamon, ginger, and he served me a delicious cup of tea in a cooler. And I had my tea. And after that, when I was going to pay him, I had no change in my purse. It was a 500 rupee note. And I was in no mood to give completely the whole money to him or to come back and collect my balance. And then I saw a little logo which I can scan and I can pay. So that is what exactly I felt, that how fintech has penetrated deep down in our lives. It is at every level. So this is the topic of the day, and of course the topic of the day is very, very interesting. So before we begin with the discussion, first of all, I would like to invite Dr. Ashwini. So sir, requesting you to give us the complete overview, the background of the industry, since you are from academics and the professor of finance. So it would be best to hear from you.
Thank you, Sanandhi. Let me share some insights about the fintech sector. As you have mentioned about your experience, gone are the days when we required to carry cash in our pockets with the fear of being robbed. Gone are the days when plastic money was required to be put up in the card holders with the fear of being of track the nearest ATM. Now is the time your world is captured in your most favorite device. That is your. But yes, you need to take the of the phone as well. As Nandi just shared, fintech is booming sector at present in terms of both business growth and employment generation. Globally, the fintech software and services industry is estimated to touch 45 billion by 2020, as per the recent report of the NASCOM. India too is experiencing this fintech boom. There are the four key segments that we have into the fintech space in our country. That includes digital payment, digital lending, insurance technology, wealth tech. With more than 2,000 startups operating in this space, the country is fertile ground for a fintech revolution. Thanks to the factors like an innovation-driven startup landscape, large market base, along with favorable regulatory policies and government-led initiatives. Fintech startups offers convenience, personalization, transparency, accessibility, and ease of use, factors that empower the customers to a great extent. If we look the fintech sector in India, it is increasingly rapid and becoming an indispensable part of everyday transaction. From a broader perspective, it is serving as a critical catalyst for financial inclusion in the country by creating lucrative opportunities for the poor and unbanked. The shift from traditional to digital payments have proven to be rewarding for both individuals and businesses, including self-employed rural entrepreneurs, small borrowers, SMEs, MSMEs. Another important factor that shaped the face of fintech is the mass market penetration of smartphones in the country that has enabled internet access for millions of people across the globe. Smartphones has also become the primary means by which people access internet and use different financial services. In fact, 2011 saw the internet grow leaps and bounds. Thanks to fintech, which has kept us safe all these days, currency could have been the one of the major reason of the community spread of our country if fintech would not have come to our rescue. Fintech has given us the solution and saved us from the efforts to go to the nearest bank. It has given us apps which has made our life so simple and worth living. If we look at the recent findings and trends in the fintech industry in the country, once only made up of sector is now welcome established companies, public and private sector banks. Awareness of financial technology has also increased. Fintech platforms are easily available to make payments for money. This indicates a positive trend and presents huge growth potential for the industry as a whole. Meanwhile, we expect fintech to make continuous innovations in terms of products, services, and delivery. If we look at a segment in the fintech, the wealth tech industry in India is witnessing the emergence of startups with innovative technologies and business models. Growing personal wealth, increased adoption of mobile and digital channels, reduced asymmetry of information between small and large financial institutions and investors are some of the factors propelling the industry forward. In the Indian fintech space, digital payments and alternative lending segments have led from the front in turbocharging the industry's growth, followed by the emerging areas of insurance technology and wealth technology. The digital payment space in particular is witnessing remarkable innovations such as the emergence of alternative payment channels, setup of payment hubs, and tokenization of securing payments. In India, fintech companies have the potential to reshape the financial services landscape in three ways. First is the startups are likely to reduce the cost and improve the quality of financial services in the country. Second is the fintech industry will develop unique and innovative models of assessing risk, leveraging big data, machine learning, and alternative data to underwrite credit and develop credit scores for customers with limited credit history. Third is fintech will create a more diverse, secured, and stable financial service landscape. Over the last 5 years, the Indian fintech market has scaled new heights, both in terms of funding received and the increasing consumer adoption of financial technology solutions. The next 5 years, coming 5 years, hold immense potential for both fintechs and incumbents to revolutionize the financial sector landscape and uplift India's economy by driving the consumption story. Pausing my thoughts here, I will invite other panelists to share their deep insights about the emergence of fintech in the country. They are indeed the best one to talk about this with all of us. Over to you, Sunandi ma'am.
Absolutely, sir. Thank you so much. You are right. We have stalwarts with us today, but you have indeed helped us in understanding the basics. Thank you so much, sir. I would now like to ask Mr. Atul. Atul, sir, as a customer, I always thought that your company, Razorpay, is just for accepting payments. And I always thought that you go on the portal, you pay the money, and I'm sure it's a lot more to the company. Being the integral part of Razorpay, we would like you to apprise us on this. Arjun, sir? Sorry, Atul, sir, over to you.
Yes, Anandi, you're right. We started off, our first offering was accepting digital payments. But as we have expanded our offering base, so, we are now doing everything that any organization, be it a startup or be it an established organization, needs to do. Just think of it. If today you were to start a company, what would you need first? The first thing you need is a current account, okay? Because you need to settle that money somewhere. So we help you open a current account. The second thing is that you will need till the time you develop your website and your own portal, you'll need a payment page which you can share with people, where people can make payments. So we power your payment. We help you build your payment page. We'll build it for you actually. Or you may say, no, I don't need a payment page. I'll just need a payment link which I can send to people. They can pay it through me and you settle in my current account. So I will give you that payment link. Once you've established your portal and you start doing online sales, so we'll help you power your online sales. Then you may even say that now, good Razorpay, now I have my business running, okay? So for example, Sanandi starts a website, sanandi.com, and you start selling, say, fashion accessories, okay? And somebody, say Arjun, comes to your site and buys something for 5 lakh rupees. Now you may say that, Atul, normally Razorpay settles money to me on T+2 basis. But since I am running a sale right now and I need the money right now, so I need a cash advance. So what I will say is fine. So I already have a successful transaction which Arjun or Dr. Vashti has done through their credit card or net banking, which I will receive the next day. So I will give you a cash advance. So I will help you drive your business. The next thing then you will say is, now Razorpay, my startup has grown, and now I want to, I have some payables also. I want to pay to my vendors. I want to, have payouts. I want to pay my salaries. Fine. We'll say we have an Offin. That's a company we acquired recently, and we'll help you reimburse your salaries also. Then you will say, fine. Now all that is very good. All that is taken care of. Now what? So, but what happens is, since I am since I normally place a category, and most of delivery orders are returned to origin. The biggest problem with COD RTO, that's returned to origin. So we'll say, fine, we have a fraud and analytics tool called the company that we acquired called ThirdWatch, where we'll help you predict these frauds and predict incomplete addresses with the history of people who have done frauds. And so you may cancel that order beforehand. So what we have done is, and along with that, there are multiple offerings like corporate credit cards, like cash flow lending, like forecasting, reconciliation, bookkeeping, expense management, bill payments, all those things coming up, So, and it's not when I coming up, I don't say 5 years coming up. I mean, some of them will be up and running next fortnight, some will be next month, and so on and so forth. So fundamentally, what we are trying to do is we are trying to build the whole fintech ecosystem. Wherever money moves, wherever an organization needs to receive money inwards or receive more money outwards or pay to anybody, Razorpay is the one-stop shop for that. Because ultimately, what Dr. Vashne also talked about fintech, so we look at it as a ecosystem. Okay, there is the customer like you and me going to websites and making payments or buying things. Then there's a merchant. These merchants, again, as I said, can be a startup, can be the biggies, the likes of Flipkart, Amazon, etc., or Yatra, Ibiza, etc., etc. The third player is the people is Razorpay, and the fourth is the fintech services providers: Visa, Mastercard, RuPay, American Express, all the banks, NPCI, etc., etc. So what we do is we give you a one-stop shop to my merchants, where I integrate all the services being offered by this side of the spectrum. So they don't need to worry about this side. They just need to worry about their customers and drive their business. So this is the whole ecosystem or the whole fintech ecosystem. That's where we are not a payments company. We are a fintech company who's actually building technology into all these fintech services.
Thank you so much, sir. It is indeed a very deep insight. Okay, sir, what do you think? The whole world is facing the outrage of COVID-19. So what has been the shift in the sales paradigm of the company amid the pandemic? And what are the plans for times to come?
Sure, that's a very valid question, Sanandi. Everybody is talking about pre-COVID, post-COVID, during COVID eras, etc., etc. Okay, so what I read COVID as chasing and closing opportunities in virus infected days. That is what COVID means for me. So, and also what I always say is that this is a situation that has been forced upon us. We didn't choose it. Life is just 20% about what happens to you and 80% about how you deal with what happens to you. As Razorpay, managing work and teams was not a challenge because we are a new age company, easier for us to work from home, ensure business continuity. Most of our interactions are virtually conducted via Zoom, Google Hangouts, phone calls, emails, etc. But the fundamental thing that we needed to do was to make sure that our employees are secure, both mentally as well as physically. When I say physically, what I mean was we started working from home almost at a very early stage, okay? Even when it had not been mandatory, because we didn't want any Razor to suffer. Then what we did was, in our first virtual all hands that we had after the COVID thing, Harshil, our founder and CEO, announced that we are not letting off any Razor for the next 1 year. We are well capitalized. We don't foresee ourselves lacking funds to operate at scale in the next 12 to 14 months. And when during an economic crisis, the path to layoff is the most effective and shorter ones. Okay. But when we announced this, it was overwhelming to see the kind of response that we have. And it goes with our, strategy, what I call is investing in PPF. For us, PPF means put people first. So our people come first always. Okay. So that is what we have done. If you drill down to the sales team, how has the sales cycle changed? For the SMB sales, people doing telephonic sales, nothing has changed because they are anyways not doing calls from home. What has changed is definitely in terms of the enterprise team, because earlier what used to be a face-to-face sales meeting now runs into multiple Zoom calls, and the sales effort has actually increased. Okay, and even the accounts are going live at a smaller stage. But what we have done is we've ensured that none of our clients, absolutely nothing changes. So if you look at it in the macro buckets of clients, the first are those clients who are doing business as usual or who are actually doing more business than pre-COVID. These are, I would not name the clients because I don't want to make this a sales pitch for Razorpay. So these are more the BFSI clients or the insurance players or the people there where you are making investments, because we've seen investments, people making a lot of online investments these days. Everybody started doing everything themselves. So for them, what we did was we said, fine, Guys, nothing changes for you. You get the same support, the same services from Razorpay as you used to do before. The second set of clients is the clients for whom there is no business these days. So what we are doing is we are keeping relationships warm there. We are talking continuously to them just to maintain the relationships, and also pitching our new products to them, and also integrating some products with them, so that whenever it's BAU for those sectors, travel, hospitality, those sectors, etc. So we hit the ground running. The third is those people whose business has slowed down. They actually have more bandwidth these days to integrate with Razorpay and integrate our services. So what we are doing is we are trying to make sure that we give more support than before in terms of our technology, and we make sure that their integration is absolutely smooth. So basically, as I always say that I work for my CTC. In fact, every Razor works for the CTC. CTC is, you may say, cost to company, which is wrong. If I'm a cost to company, why will the company have me? Fundamental thing, nobody wants to have costs. So for me, CTC means my clients, my team, and my company. So what we've done is we've ensured that every component of the CTC is well taken care of. And that is what drives us, and that is what has ensured that keeping everyone meaningfully engaged and meaningfully employed in this, and ensuring that everybody feels that it's as our culture values, one razor for another, or Razorpay grows with razors. So we know that the razors, if the razors grow, Razorpay will automatically grow. So that is what our overall strategy is. And one closing thought on this, what we feel is that if you take care of your physical and mental and financial safety of the people you work with, the business profit loss will take care of itself.
Absolutely, sir. It was very, very insightful. Thank you for giving us acronyms like PPF and CTC. These are never heard before acronyms. Okay, so moving to Arjun, sir. Arjun, sir, I would like to ask you that Edcast being the pioneer in technology, how is the organization working with BFSI sector?
All right. So the question which someone asked me was that, in a fintech webinar, what are you going to talk about? Well, we're taking a very fundamental and transformational role. Let me just share with you the journey of how we're going about it. So let me first tell you what does Edcast do and what do we stand for. So Edcast is an award-winning AI-powered cloud for unified discovery and personalized learning. We've got customers from Fortune 500 companies, multinational organizations, and recently we were also elected to join the World Economic Forum's Technology Pioneer Class of 2020. Companies which have been like in this bucket earlier were Google, Airbnb, Twitter, Spotify, and the likes of those. Let me just share with you what are the broad solutions that we offer and how it's applied in the BFSI and the fintech sector to change their game. So we have three solutions. One is learning experience platform. The second is a learning marketplace, and the third is My Guide. The first is really like all internal content, external content, learning content, which is coming from, it could be the internet, it could be free sources, paid sources, it could be edX or Coursera or HBR. So imagine one hub where you can learn everything and you can get one view of the learner, right? He doesn't have to go to many different places to figure out what to learn where. And because it's AI powered and personalized learning, we actually able to surface content where, we surface content specifically differently for different people. And depending on what they like to learn, that content will be shown. So it's very much like Netflix. So we are also known as Netflix for learning. And because companies also allow people to curate content, so any expert like Atul within his company may want to talk about with the rest of his team, we would give curator rights where he could post content which he may feel relevant for his company, which is very much like Facebook. So we also like the Facebook for learning.
Hmm.
Number first, learning marketplace, which is very much like the Amazon. So Amazon is a marketplace where there are sellers and buyers. But in our case, we have a learning marketplace. We've got training providers and content providers from all over the world. So let's say, for example, you're looking for things like IoT or blockchain and new technologies. You're not going to be able to find those very easily, perhaps within India. So in that case, you'd go to the marketplace and find those people and that content, and that will plug in straight into your company. Um, and therefore we are also the Amazon for learning. And then we've got, let's say Atul makes a sale to Fiserv, and in Fiserv we are implementing Razorpay. Now, what are the various steps which need to be followed? You know, and at what stage who needs to click what is something that we need to lay out like a GPS. So it's like a Google map for learning. So we are the Google map, we are the Facebook, we are the
Amazon.
and Amazon for learning. All right. Now, given that context, this has been a very, very important time for companies which are, as people put it, the PPF. Okay, so any company which put people first said this is a great time to invest into people and help them reskill, upskill. In fact, our biggest set of clients, we work with the world's largest financial services and fintech companies. I'll just name a few. So NSC, National Stock Exchange, works with us to upskill, reskill all of them. Okay, IIFL, ICICI Securities, Mahindra Finance, Click Capital, Westpac, Macquarie, Standard Chartered, RBS, Charles Schwab. Now all these companies are working with us globally. You know, so imagine now. What's interesting is that banks are realizing that companies like Razorpay, you know, are doing something really fantastic. So they want to ensure that they let people know what are some of the game-changing technologies which are shaping the future of work. Therefore, they said, I want to surface content around blockchain, IoT, AI for a particular team. And what one team may get to see will be very different from what another team would get to see. So therefore, we are working with very large financial services companies to say, here, we are equipping our team for the future of work and gearing ourselves for the fintech world.
Absolutely, sir. This is very, very insightful. Thank you so much. So, sir, can you apprise us on the people skill amid the present time? I mean, how EdCast is exactly, you just talked about reskilling and upskilling. So, how EdCast is exactly helping the people to upskill and reskill, especially concerning with the current times?
Right. So what I'm going to take is two use cases and talk about two things. One would be, let's take a bank. Okay. Now, bank has people who've been associated with financial services. They know that space really well. But it's a huge mammoth organization, with maybe 80, 90,000 people globally. Now, how do you ensure that people in the bank actually understand what needs to do, what needs to be learned to become more digitally savvy? So therefore, what the bank may decide with the innovation team, with the uh, learning and development team, that different teams and different regions need to learn different things. So one team may say we need to understand how blockchain works, whereas another team says IoT and AI is very important for us. Another team may say data analytics is going to be critical to our success. Now, imagine if we were to bundle all of that together and say, this team will get to see this and it's going to be gamified. So, therefore, the engagement on the entire platform is huge. So, normal learning management systems are in the 4-8% engagement rate. We normally hit about 40-50%. So that's one, how banking financial services are looking at it to transform themselves as organizations. Okay, now let's take even a larger canvas. So you asked about how reskilling and upskilling is happening. And with regard to fintech, so in 2017, Boston Consulting Group had actually done a survey for a study for NASSCOM, and they focused on the future of work. And they said, here are 10 emerging technologies and 10 professional skills which are going to drive the future of work. And these are the industries, or these are the technologies which will drive different industries, and it will not be specific to a particular industry, but they'll cut across different industries. Now we are working with NASSCOM on the Future Skills project, and we are driving it with them. We are the backbone behind that. Now, it initially started as a business to business, so only businesses which had needed the future skills content were there. Then those businesses said, we'd want academia also to come on board. And that's when academic institutions started coming on board. And then the government said, listen, here you're doing businesses, you're doing academia. Why don't you skill the citizen of India on these 10 emerging technologies? So we're going to hear about it very soon, where we would open it up for learning these different technologies and these professional skills in areas such as blockchain, cybersecurity, cloud computing, virtual reality, AI, big data, all of that. And even the professional skills, the softer skills, which are equally important for success, are things around collaboration, continuous learning, communication, project management, program management, innovation, design thinking, all of that. So we are working with organizations, with governments, with academia to ensure that we all know how to become digitally savvy and are able to use these technologies to drive the future of work.
Absolutely, sir. That's really great, especially the areas that you are specifically focusing upon, especially soft skills, which I think very less companies focus upon, and which is one of the major areas where a lot of people who are employable are lacking. So this is one area that the whole economy needs to focus upon, especially in fintech. Moving to Megha ma'am. Okay, Megha ma'am, being the director HR of Fiserv, so what do you think? What upskilling and reskilling is required for the people who are working in the fintech sector and who aspire to work in the fintech sector? So there is a lot of people who are actually working in the fintech sector right now, and there are a lot of youth who aspire to work in fintech sector. So what is upskilling and reskilling required for them?
Sure. So thank you so much. So let me, bring the focus from business to people aspect. Let me just put some landscape for each one of you. So I was reading in one of the article and research, which, without taking names of the research, but, it clearly said that in Q2, and I'm restricting this conversation to India, while I can always give global stats. But, in India, in the last quarter, which is Q2, there was 69% drop in the hiring percentage. So let me first call that out. That's a reality to us. And not just us, but every single organization that is facing to, which means people are very choosy in the kind of talent that they hire, whether it's fintech, whether it's technology, or any other organization. And that's primarily happening because, while the, any fintech, the future is bright, but at the same time, this is also a time to fundamentally think and reinvent and say that, okay, do we want to grow how we were growing for last 2 to 3 years, or will our business model will fundamentally change? And hence there is a, the hiring is only happening for niche roles or super critical roles, and most of the hiring have started to rethink about, should we hire now for, say, a Java skill or a C++ skill or any other skill, or should we start hiring for people which have, which typically in a fintech organization or technology organization we call as a T skill, which means, you do have a depth of a particular skill, but you still are, aware of everything from a skill standpoint and are ready to be reskillable. So I'll call this word and say, somebody who has the learning agility. I think those are, people that, in a future standpoint, fintech or any other technology organization will think through. They would think about, okay, this person has a core expertise of Java, but at the same time, the person is able to do a program management, the person is able to do a testing, the person is able to do couple of other stuff, because the world is moving to agile. From waterfall, world is moving through engineering culture, and with all of that coming in place, organization will more and more be mindful about people who can they rotate within the organization, rather than thinking of hiring super niche and critical skills in the organization. So I feel the future holds for people who are ready to move within organization, people who are ready to take risk, which means today I will become an HR head not only because if I do recruitments or HR business partner role, I will only become when I have done all different roles within the HR fraternity as well. And that's true for our technologists, that's true for our program management as well. So it's true for each one of us. So and it's more and more coming together, because organizations will now stand to say, should I be hiring somebody from outside, or can I make my internal people mobile through the scalability to people who are ready to take risk, rather than really thinking from massively hire people at mid management and senior management from outside. So the new trend that I've seen is people are putting right now a lot of efforts in training, reskilling the internal people, and try to move most of the middle management positions or mid senior position internally, so that they only have to hire people from campus or a couple of junior folks, which is a better model in terms of cost, in terms of replaceability, in terms of time to fill. And I feel the best thing right now, and advice to all students, open in your mindset. Don't get fixated to the fact that, hey, I'm a hardcore person and around this, and therefore I will only go for roles around that. Keep your mindset open, because organizations now would be very, very careful about the fact, hey, if I hire this person and I have a role for this person or a project for 6 months or 9 months, what will I do about this person more than 9 months? So think about those aspects. Think about the fact that the bench period is getting shortened in the fintech as well, which means we would want people to be redeployed, reskilled, and take up new skills, which is hot skills in the organization, and just move on.
Absolutely. Okay, so ma'am, now the employees are actually missing the office space amidst all the digital world, what exactly we are going in and we are moving into. So how can the employees be motivated among the digital inclusion when they are actually missing the office spaces?
So great point. While I would say we are dealing with, a lot of multi-generation workforce, and not just me, I think technology organizations are mostly somewhere between 70 to 90% millennial, if you typically see. And it's a reality, which means they are much more tech savvy than, any other generation, so-called generation. And hence, I would say, while they are missing the physical aspect, I think they're very pro about having meetings on technology, or, leveraging, different Zoom versions, or, imagine if the same scenario was with, say, 20 years ago, and you still had Zoom, you still had Teams, but maybe the adoption would have been far different than what we are seeing today. So I think we sometimes say it because we don't have the when we say social distancing, I would rather say it's a physical distancing, because now it's the time where we need much more social collaboration than ever before. So it means we definitely are keeping physical distancing, but social distancing is not to be there. It's a time to be socially collaborative. And I feel organizations are doing a lot. There is a lot that organizations have started to think about. Like recently, Accenture has launched that, to avoid the burnouts and the amount of meeting times, to have no meetings after 5:30 p.m. So that's a new thing that, we've recently seen, like this week. Similarly, I think a lot of organizations have tried to deal with burnouts by giving one additional days of off, or multiple things are happening. So I think organization with the pandemic has also been very, very sensitive, and, they are being empathic and much more empathetic than they were before, around, what's happening around people's life. But it's about, and I always, when I was talking to one of the panel and they asked me, what's her advice? I would say, absolutely, it's a difficult time for each one of you. But at the same time, maintain your social forum with people, because today jobs will be much more available when you create your social network. The second piece, my advice is maintain your work-life balance. I do know that when you're at home, there is no start time, there is no end time for your work. So it's upon you to say, okay, this is the time that I want to start. This is the time I want to end. I know it's not doesn't work all the ways, but at least have that in your mind that 80% time I'll, follow that. 20% time, of course, we all know that it doesn't work, and sometimes there's urgently things that come across. But if you try to maintain your work life, even if 4 days a week you follow it and Mondays is screwed, it's fine. You're still maintaining that balance for yourself. But if you don't do that, there would be a tipping point for you, which is going to take away your family responsibilities, your emotional well-being, your physical well-being. Everything is going to go for a toss. So my only advice is, after a quarter, I absolutely personally and our organization have realized that this is not a short-term game. The work from home is going to continue for much longer than we expected in the month of April, which means, now it's more and more needed to think about your emotional and mental well-being. And nobody can do it. Trust me, I can do 10 sessions for emotional well-being, or 10 sessions for financial well-being. And right now I'm planning, actually, what does work from home? Can we do hardship allowance? Can we do no Friday day, meeting day? All of that jazz we'll do. But at the end of the day, and I was just talking to my husband right now, just before this conference, and said, hey, I'm putting this together, what do you think about it? And he said, if you honestly ask me, and he works in a PE firm, so he's a hardcore number guy. So he says, while what you're putting together is great, but if you ask me what do I want as an associate, I would always think about, hey, just give me some peace time from all the meetings and work, because right now I need much more mental peace and time off than anything else. Imagine, we think as an HR, oh, let's do this, let's do hardship allowance, electricity bills are opening up, let's give some money. But what associate really needs on the ground is a day off, maybe, or just less number of meetings so they can focus on work. So, and I just stepped back and said, okay, so maybe I have to, while I'm doing what I'm putting together is great, but there's something else that I need to think about, which means goes back to the point, organization can help you as much. It's all upon how you maintain your work-life balance. So goes back to you as an individual. What do you want to follow?
Ma'am, this is really a lovely point being raised by you, work-life balance, and definitely this is just physical distancing and not an emotional one. Okay, so now we require some academician to rope in. Nidhi ma'am, requesting you to please answer that as an educationist, what are the pedagogical interventions that are required to prepare the B School graduates for the fintech sector?
Okay, Sanandi, I was listening to all the industry people, and and I am excited to talk about the academia, because a lot of members who are attending it and the participants are from academia as well. So they will be thinking about the challenges, what they are going to face. Someone has said that finance has ruled the world, but now technology is going to rule the finance. And here, listening to all the panelists for the B School graduates, I think it is an exciting time to launch a career in finance. But I could also see that it is the biggest challenge, that is the skill gap, which has become a matter of concern for both academia and the industry. So to address this global talent shortage within finance, what we need is we have to start building these skills at the institutional level, so that we could have growth in the next generation of financial professionals who will be well versed in the technology, as well as they would have the potential to propel this industry into the future. And as a academician, what I think is we need to do pedagogical interventions, and I have identified two folds of pedagogical interventions. The first one may be in the curricular interventions, where we are going to see the content delivery, how the content is to be delivered, and what should be the pedagogical skills. And second will be the skill enhancement for employability, or imparting them the skills which will make them employable. Okay. So the first thing which would be coming up will be the content delivery, or the curricular interventions. Rather, I should say the curricular interventions. We see that curricular is a very important part for any type of course. And as a B School also, the institutions, they should, along with their traditional syllabus, should start teaching the students about how the markets are influenced by these technological advancements. And they should also help the students who have new ideas, or should also motivate them to come up with the business ideas, so that they can be a part of this technological driven financial system, and they can be entrepreneurs as well. They can be innovators of technology. Coming to the content part, the content should be designed to give them knowledge, which will be able to help them to be employable in the technology industry, as well as they should be given ample experience for applying that knowledge to the real world problems, because we see there is a gap when we go for the theoretical part and when it comes to application. So the institution should also be focusing on them. And above all, they should be critical thinking, which should be a primary element in this curriculum offering. Why so? Because the workplaces are changing so fast, and for those fast changing workplaces, it has become important that critical thinking should be there within the B school graduates. One more thing that is very important is that there should be an exchange and transfer of knowledge from industry and academia. See, the industry and academia, they have to go hand in hand. And it can be in the form of initiating scholarships, sharing the resources with the industry, sharing research, collaborations, and maybe embarking on joint internship and training programs in the applied fintech area, so that we can make these students industry ready. And for ensuring this, that there is a regular transfusion and transmission of information from industry and academia, the B schools, they should create an advisory board where there should be an experts from the industry and the professionals from the industry who would be regularly examining that what courses are to be offered, and if the courses are offered, that they should just revisions as per the industry trends, because we all are very well aware that once the curriculum is decided, it's very tough that we should revise it. And but it is very important now for the academics that they should revisit their syllabus, so that they would move up with the industry trends to make the students employable. And above all, the faculty training part. See, we all, I as a faculty, as educationist, as well as you, we need to be trained for all those, see, because we play a very important role when we are imparting those skills. If you're talking about your soft skill part, or rather I should talk about these skills which we'll be talking later on, what skills are required. Our faculty should be trained. The reason is what? The faculty should be trained because they will be the people who will be imparting, and if they are well equipped, then the students, they would be able to impart the right skills to the students. And we can also do one more thing is that with the traditional focus as on finance, we can have elective courses, we can have certification, professional certification with the course, so that we can be adaptive to this changing technology. See, this is what we can do for the curriculum. And now coming up to the second intervention, which I was focusing, is that the skill enhancement of these students. So if I say what skills are to be imparted to these students, see, there is no denying fact that the employability of the MBA students or the MBA graduates, a lot of industry people are sitting there, they would be agreeing with my point that it has to be raised. The employability of these students has to be raised, keeping in pace with the technological advancements. And here what happens is the B school, when I talk about fintech, the B school faces two types of issues. The first one is they have the students from the non-finance background, because when they come to B schools, we don't have such thing. So we have students from the non-finance background, and it is difficult to make them acquainted with the domain knowledge. Secondly, we also have students from the finance background, those students say, no, we are very confident, we know it all. And it is very difficult to make them unlearn and then relearn for them, because they make it critical to unlearn the things which they have studied earlier. But with this advent of technology, both the clusters are to be trained. Both the clusters are to be trained, both on the part of the finance as well as on the technology. Keeping forefront in forefront the technology, we need to train them in finance as well. See, the thing is that with the concepts are important and the applicability of the concept is important, but above all is the skill set which is required to execute it. So the skill set to execute is the paramount, and we have to go with it. on my whatever I have read, I have identified ABCD skills. And this ABCD skills, I can say A is for the accounting and the analytical skills, which can be clubbed with artificial intelligence and automations. B for the blockchain skills. C is for crypto marketing, or I can say credit mechanism and all, that is the C. And D is for decision sciences. A course is for decision sciences. So these ABCD skills, they are very much required for any academic institutions to be practiced if they want their students to be ready for the industry. And the B schools should focus on developing this skill set, so that the students, when they are going to join the workforce, they will be an asset to the organization. We have people from HR, they also would be facing the same challenges because they see this skill gap. They have to make the industry ready. But one thing is that the millennials, they are the great tech adopters. They are very well versed in technology and they are ready for adapting the technology. There is only a need to strike at the right time to shape for a better careers to them. For us, for people like us, fintech seems to be a game changer because we have to make ourselves ready. But let me tell you one thing, that for the entrance, it will be a norm, and we all need to keep ourselves ready with it. So my point is that by two interventions, the one is the curriculum intervention, and the second one is the skill enhancement or the skill imparting, we can make our students ready. So that is all from my side. Thank you.
Absolutely, ma'am. Thank you so much for giving this ABCD, and this will help all the academic institutes and the millennials. Okay, so Mr. Atul, as you were telling us that tech has been the company's competency and cash being your biggest competition. Please give us insights on it. And also, do you think that payment portals like Paytm, PayU is the competition for Razorpay?
Yeah, sure, Sanandhi, I'll come to that. But before that, I'll just pick up on 2 or 3 points which Megha and Dr. Mathur said, and I just wanted to add 1 point each. I'll just take 2 minutes for that, then I come to the question that you asked me. Megha rightly said it is not social distancing, it is physical distancing. And we are emotionally and socially connected. It's a wrong thing to say social, as I say in Hindi, दूरियों का मतलब फासले नहीं होता. So we might be physically away from each other, emotionally connected, and everybody will agree, especially the HR. HR has been doing a stellar job in this, by arranging all the water cooler sessions. We've been arranging poker nights. In fact, I'm the poker host for Razorpay. Okay, and we do that. And to the students, again, Megha, I could not agree more when Megha said, people need to be fungible and they need to be prepared about all the jobs that need to be done. Because for me, the easiest hiring to do is to hire from someone who has payment industry background and make him hit the ground running. If you ask me personally, I'd love to invest my energy and time with a fresher because I feel they can be molded. Like, but when they make a pot out of that soil, you can mold it any way you want. But once it is molded, then you can't do anything about it. So that's what I feel that, freshers have an unfair advantage when it comes to their moldability, but they themselves should be willing to do that. Not that I've done my MBA in marketing, so I'll only do marketing. Or if I've done my MBA in finance, I'll only do finance. Because, and then, carrying forward on her point about balance, it's very, very essential to maintain balance in these times. So 2-3 things that I've done myself. I fixed time for my meals first. You saw me having my tea because 5 p.m. is my tea time. Whatever happens, I'll have tea at 5 o'clock. Whatever happens, my breakfast at 10 o'clock, my lunch at 2 o'clock, 5 o'clock tea, 8 o'clock dinner, khatam. Because otherwise, this will never end. You will be in one call or the other and you'll always keep saying, abhi nahi. And you need to dress up for work. That's very important. Initial 1-2 days, I just sat in my t-shirt and my pajamas and I said, fine. But then I said, it actually works on your mind. The way you dress up, the way you, so it's very important to have that balance part. And I couldn't agree more with Dr. Mathur when she said academia and industry need to come together. And because ultimately, the virtue of the projects that you are doing, faculty like Dr. Vashne, whatever you might be interacting with the industry, you do have great experience, but nothing beats when somebody from the industry comes and talks to the students. And I feel that that's an advantage that is webinars have given us. Now my travel time is sorted. I don't need to come to Ghaziabad. Okay, I can take a lecture sitting right now for 1 hour and then switch off. That's it. So just covering those points. Coming back to the original question that Sanandi asked me. Sanandi, you are absolutely right. The companies that you named, PayU, Paytm, Builders, CC Avenue, they are not our competition. They are not our competition. They are our friends actually. And why I call that? There are 2 or 3 reasons for that. First thing, that out of the total money movement happening in India, only a fraction of it is being done digitally. Still, there are people writing checks, people going to the banks to deposit, take out money, and also on and so forth. We feel that anybody who's contributing to making it digital is working towards the betterment of the ecosystem. And there's so much world outside the current digital thing that instead of fighting amongst ourselves, if we can fight with the cash or with offline, it will serve everyone. That is why if you look at our product line of ePOS or Smart Collect, where we automated NEFT RTGS, or doing this, loan on demand, where you just go to the dashboard and click how much loan you want. So what we are trying to do is we are trying to bring more and more people on the digital platform. So if you look at it as a big circle out of which a pie, only a small part is digital right now. Technology always comes first. There are payment companies who use technology. We are a technology company who's into payments. So tech is our front bone, backbone, whatever you call it, So, and that's also the reason why you'll always see us, being at the forefront of all the innovations. And also if you remember the 4-part ecosystem that I talked about. So what we do is we do deep technical integration with all the players, and we ensure that all of that is packaged neatly and given to all the merchants. That is how we look at this whole ecosystem. And that is why we feel that cash and offline is our biggest.
Let me, Atul, ask you a follow-up question. I hope when you're dressing up office, it's not a pajama and a shirt.
It's
Yeah, this is actually a very good question. But
I'll tell you a trade secret. There are times when I wear shoes also. No, seriously. No, I'm serious about it. Arjun, you have to do, I mean, you'll see how awkward you feel when you wear shoes after 2 months and you say, ye bhi hota hai kya kuch?
Right.
So in lighter vein, actually, I am known to always dress up very formally. So on all our meetings, I was always wearing a shirt, and they say we don't put our camera because of you. And in one meeting, I was actually asked to stand up, and they said they wanted to check whether I was wearing pajamas or trousers. So, Megha, to your point, I do wear trousers as well. So, yes, it does bring a sense of discipline and a sense of
Yes.
this is my workspace and work timing. So I like Atul, I actually start work probably 8:30 in the morning. There is no end time, to be honest. But yes, there is a certain discipline that you must do certain the day, otherwise things can go pretty oddly.
Absolutely great addings. And from the next time in the next webinar, we will also have our tea. So we will be ready for that, because skipping meals whenever you're working from home, again, a very major point, which is we are least bothered about, but this is actually a point which we need to focus upon. Anyway, we are having a very good reach. We have around like 800 participants on Facebook, 500 participants on Zoom, and everybody is thoroughly enjoying the session. So I just want to intervene and thank you all for giving such lovely discussions. Participants are really putting on some excellent comments. Okay, so coming to Mr. Arjun, sir, how do you think fintech can make people's life easy, and how will it trickle down to the lowest part of the economy? And what are some interventions which are required by the industry amid COVID and post-COVID?
Okay, so November 8th, 2018, was it when demonetization happened, or was it 2017? Yeah, 2018. And I had all of 300 rupees in my pocket, and I was laughing my way to the bank because I actually said I do all my transactions online anyways, so it's not going to make any difference. And believe you me, those 300 rupees lasted me for another 20 days because I managed doing all my transactions online because I was already dealing with the Razor Pays and the Paytms of the world. So number one, I think the moment banks and fintechs enable e-commerce and transactions, that's number one. Even in this sort of an environment, if we are able to drive all of that, it really helps. Number two is local supply chains are greatly being benefited, and you're going to see Geo come out with some mind-blowing stuff, which is going to change the supply chain network, and that's fueled and powered by a lot of fintech. Right? I have also worked with the government, and I have seen, that a lot of the digital initiatives that they're driving, it does get to the last mile, all thanks to a lot of fintech, which is actually coming into play. And it's phenomenal that if leakage can be prevented at various stages, the government is doing a fantastic job. And then the fourth thing, to Neha's delight and what Atul was saying, I think the moment we link up digital wallet with other services as well, where your identity is known, your health services are known, your insurance is all bucketed, it sort of provides a holistic solution. And right now is the best time to do it. So this for initiatives that I think can be really game changers.
Absolutely right, sir. Thank you so much. Quickly moving to Ms. Megha, ma'am. What has been the shift in the practices at Pfizer amidst the pandemic, and what are the plans for future for the company? Megha, ma'am.
Sure. So again, there are multiple shifts in the practices, but I'll keep focusing on the HR practices for now. So I would say the biggest shift that I've seen in the pandemic time is obviously moving a lot around what is the need of an hour, I would say, which means if the engagement was used to happen through obviously physical events, they have absolutely moved virtually. And when I say it's not about the fun piece of getting together or celebrate something, but more around how do we build more connection with work from home today is not just work from home. It's like work from anywhere, because people who are stuck in their hometowns are still in their hometowns. People who are operating out of PGs, they are reaching out to us, hey, if next 3 months we are not going to open the office, can we just vacate the PG and be in our hometowns and work? Because there's no point for us to pay rent because we are not going to come to office. So that's the ground reality. And instead of creating fancy stuffs or continue to do the fancy stuff, what we're thinking about, what's the need of an hour, which means we started to build more connection with our associates, whether it's HR, whether it's the business leaders. We have started to think about how do we connect with associates almost every single week. We ensure that one of the HR business partner and one of the business is interacting with a group of people, which were earlier times it was not the need, but this time we will say it's absolutely a need for us to just know how people are doing, what are they feeling on the ground, how can we help them, how are their families. So we're doing all of that. The second shift that we have done is which is a HR plus combination of business of doing the BCP planning. Now, as a fintech organization, because most of our clients are US based clients, it was an utmost important, because anything that happens in US, India is a backup, right? But this is a BCP planning where the entire world is impacted. So what happens, and this has happened, obviously started in the month of April itself, where we started, what happens if India start to see a sudden surge in COVID cases, which means people have to go on vacation for minimum 14 days. So who's going to be backup? We can't go back to US because US is already struggling. We can't go back to Costa Rica or any other geo. So within India, if we have to make the backup, how will it work? So the entire planning from saying 30% absenteeism to 60% absenteeism, I think an entire plan was made. I think that was a big thing that we have never seen in the organization, because earlier the planning used to happen and backup plan used to happen within countries, but not within the same geography, especially to a level of 30 to 70% absenteeism at the same time. time. So I think that's a big shift at an organization that HR can play, and think about how do we manage pandemics. And the last piece, of course, everything that we do within HR has to be rethought through, whether it's, engagement, whether it's recognition, whether it's, insurance itself, because you now need to think about, instead of saying, oh, what about COVID patient? Hey, what about their families? Can we give additional 14 days off to people, because this is just a different year for us. Can we think about virtual onboarding? Can we think about, when we hire, the normal culture is at least one round of interview has to be in person. Now that's not going to happen in this scenario. So how do we now go back and teach our people managers and leaders to say it's okay to have, a virtual interview, because there's not going to be at least one mandatory physical round. So, what are the checkpoints that you need to do? So just relooking at the entire TA process, just going back and training our people managers around how to manage virtual teams. Let's be real, people are not used to it. No matter we say we are a technology organization, but people are not used to 100% work from home. So, what are some of the sessions that we can do for our people managers to enable them around that? So there's a lot that, as an HR function, and I'm just saying HR, business has done much more, when it comes to business planning and everything else. But there is a shift, 360-degree shift, I would say, in every single thing that we do as an HR today. And some of this is going to be short term, some of this is going to be long term. We are relooking at location strategy to say, should we look at 30% work from home going forward? We don't know the answer right now, but we're thinking about that. I'm thinking about the engagement piece across the organization, including, hardship allowance, to say, oh, tomorrow we used to do family day in the month of December. Do we want to just take that away, or do we want to introduce a virtual family day? How do we thank family for going through that, what our associates have gone through? We're thinking about, is work from home the new normal for us, while we continue for a short duration, but what does it mean for us long term? So we are fundamentally challenging ourselves. We are fundamentally questioning each and everything that we do today. We have become much more agile and empathetic to our associate. Not that we were never, but these are hard times for everyone, and we understand. But at the same time, we are now reaching out to each and every associate on a weekly and a monthly and a bi-weekly basis to just get the feelers on the ground, to know what associates are asking for, and solving it every week as well. Like it's like extremely agile. I say the pace of things to move in the organization, and a normal thing would be 6 months minimum to introduce a new program, or think about a global program. Now the speed is like monthly. Monthly a large level org level program will roll out, and it will roll out globally. And even if you want to do it for India for 7,000 people, the speed of everything execution has become weekly or bi-weekly, because that's the speed that we're connecting with people, that's the speed we're getting feedback, and that's the speed we want to turn out as well. So that's an interesting piece that's going on.
Wonderful insights, ma'am. So in today's webinar, starting from fintech to reskilling to work-life balance, we had it all. Thank you so much to all the panelists for being with us for the day. So thank you, Ashwini sir, for giving us the overview of fintech. It actually helped us to trickle down to the base and learn the very concept and the sector. Thank you, Atul sir, for helping us know that how Razorpay will help us driving our business, and from all the offerings, that you have been making as a company for all the customers, for being the one stop for all the customers, and for telling us that life is just 20% about what happens and 80% how you deal with it, for giving us the acronyms of PPF and CTC. I'm sure our audiences will remember it for life. Thank you, Arjun sir, for telling us that how Edcast is working with the Fortune 500 companies, and how Edcast is the learning hub for each and every learner, for giving us the comparative examples of Netflix, Facebook, Amazon, and which helped us to understand the working efficiently. And the company is really doing a lot. Thank you so much, Arjun sir, for being with us for the day. Megha ma'am, thank you so much for telling us the importance of key skills, agility, importance of scalability, importance of work-life balance, and most of all, the importance of empathy, which is actually a mandate in this scenario, and helping each and every individual to be emotionally sound. Thank you, Nidhi ma'am, for giving us the ABCD of the skill set. Thank you for giving us the two major interventions that we as academia require to make the curricular intervention and the skilling intervention. thanking all the audience who have been listening to us, putting wonderful comments, watching us across Zoom, across Facebook. Thank you everyone for being with us for the day. So I'll be closing the session for the day. Thank you everyone. I have learned a lot and the things that I never knew. Thank you so much everyone.
Thank you very
Thanks,
much.
guys.